30 seconds.
Good morning. The only important story in the world today is what is happening and what is about to happen in Libya. And I can't help but telling you that I remember well that when the Duke of Wellington was sitting on the top of a hill on the fields of Europe, and he was surveying the armies on both sides, he looked at Napoleon's troops and he looked at his own troops and he said, "I'm not afraid of Napoleon's men, but I'm scared to death by my own army." And I think that's how most Canadians and many Americans must feel when they see what has happened in the last couple of weeks on the world stage. When we saw that dreadful performance by the President of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, saying like a teenage Rambo, "I am a Contra. And this and that must be done, or we'll all be invaded and taken over by a few people from Central America." And then in the face of Gorbachev's apparently deadly serious moratorium on nuclear test explosion, Reagan explodes a bomb underneath the Nevada desert. And I think the clip on last night's coverage and all the networks that frightened me most of all was not the bombing or the missile or the shelling or the ships being sunk, but the fact that Larry Speaks for the White House said, "This is a peaceful incursion in international waters," as they crossed the line of death at the Gulf of Sirte, with the Soviet fleets lying still quietly. I'm sure that this will not escalate much further, but God hopes that Reagan is in control of his mind and his functions, and that the people around him are not going to have any more peaceful incursions which could lead to you-know-what. All you can do is cross your fingers. So from the tragedies and potential disasters of international affairs, we got to come back to our own particular level. And let me show you our particular level this morning. This pamphlet on poverty in BC, a teaching aid, cost the BC Teachers Federation about $9,000. These pamphlets, given to children in the schools discovering BC by our taxpayers' money, cost $300,000. They're both somewhat elementary propaganda. I always thought the schools were for teaching, not for propaganda. But here this morning to defend the use of this in a certain manner is Pat Clarke, whose teachers are still under heavy concentrated fire from the social credit government in Victoria. Pat Clarke, of course, is the top guy in the BC Teachers Federation. Now, at a meeting last night of a committee of the Vancouver School Board, discussions took place about the use of this one. There we are, poverty in British Columbia. And what will COPE
We're
do?
here today to ask you to endorse the use of our resource unit, Poverty in BC, in the classrooms in Vancouver and to include it in your program of in-service education. It's made up of facts and statistics on poverty in BC. It's got some suggested student activities and lists of print, video, and community resources.
I think that this is a good dose or remedy to that kind of feeling, and so I think it's timely. Our general practice is to receive the report and wait for the officials, but we're going to, I'm quite sure, endorse it.
Having heard nothing to the contrary, I think that Committee 3 is in a position to recommend to the board that it should endorse the use of the teaching unit. And on behalf of Committee 3, thank you very much, Jean and Sandy, for your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
It's a fact of political life that Mr. Church couldn't hear anything to the contrary since the total sweep of the school board positions in Vancouver by COPE. Off the top of the program this morning, I'm going to be interviewing Anne Harvey, president of O.T.E.U. Local 378, the SkyTrain people, the prospect, the almost treasonable prospect, some would say, of a strike on SkyTrain. And for light relief at the end of the program, do you want to buy a mortgage? I've got a man in the studio today who gives out $2 billion worth of mortgages, and his name is Mr. Tom Alton, president of the Bank of Montreal Mortgage Corporation. But first, after the break, the score on the possibility of a SkyTrain strike. Local 378 of the Office and Technical Employees Union, who are bargained for the 250 workers on the SkyTrain, are talking about strike. Now, how serious are you about strike, Anne Harvey, president of the local? Because you haven't had your first agreement yet, have you?
No, we haven't. We were certified last June, and we're negotiating for a first collective agreement. And we're serious about reaching a first collective agreement. So this morning, we're announcing the first step in our job action program.
You're taking on the job action right now. First of all, did you have a strike vote?
Yes, we had a strike vote in January. It was 97%.
Well, that's routine because the union is going to vote for strike to give the executive power in any case. Is that not so?
97% is not routine.
Now, having taken that strike vote, said he, going for the bad news, when could you strike?
We could strike as early as last Friday. That was when we were in a legal position to strike.
And you seriously suggesting to me that with the opening of Expo coming up, that you'd be quite prepared if you have to be on strike and put a dreadful black mark on British Columbia's great effort for recovery?
We don't want a confrontation. We don't want to close down SkyTrain, and we don't want to disrupt the World's Fair. But we need a first collective agreement. We were promised one by the end of last year.
Who promised you?
We still don't. The company promised us one by the end of last year. When we were certified in June, we told the company that we wanted to set the negotiations so that we could get a collective agreement by the end of 1985 so that we wouldn't disrupt Expo. We didn't want to be tangled
Well, are they
up in
not
Expo.
bargaining with you now, or have you just failed in your bargain?
They haven't been bargaining with us for some time now. Yesterday they contacted us, and we're going back to the negotiating table this afternoon with special mediator Vince Reddy.
How close are you? Are you making outrageous demands, or are you looking for something equivalent to a bus driver?
We're asking for...
Or an office worker, really?
Well, no. We've got highly skilled technicians in here. We've got the electronics technicians and the vehicle technicians, all of who are dealing with this new technology. So we're looking at highly skilled people, and all we want for them is the same wages that are being paid to transit workers in other companies. We're not asking for anything outrageous. All we want is
Same
parity.
wage as bus drivers?
No, it's the technicians are at a higher skill level than drivers, so we'll be looking for
Can you
higher
give me an
wages than
idea of how
drivers.
much money we're looking at for these skilled people? Say 18, 20 bucks an hour?
We're looking at equivalent wages to what technicians are paid at BC Hydro,
What would
which
that
is
be?
in that range.
In that range,
In
18
that
to
range.
$20 an
Yes.
hour. And you're negotiating actually with BC Transit?
We're negotiating with BC Rapid Transit, which is a private operating company.
Now, what job action have you ordered, or are you going to take starting today?
Starting today, we've got an overtime ban in place. We do expect that to cause some minor disruption to the schedules, and we are warning the public that because these people at SkyTrain are working anywhere between 10 and 25% overtime. And so we do expect that now we're stopping working overtime, there will be some disruption to the schedule.
When a shift ends, a man will walk off?
Yes, exactly.
Not until the train has finished its day's work, though.
No, they won't be walking off where there's any safety considerations, but they will not be working overtime, and that has been a routine for the past 6 months for our SkyTrain
Well, if you've been
workers.
working 10 to 25% overtime, it must mean the possibility of considerable disruption as of 10 o'clock today.
We think that there will be some minor disruption. We don't expect the disruption to occur today, but we think that it will start occurring towards the end of this week, and that will have an accumulative effect.
And O.T.E.U members who don't get a meal break, as see here, during the course of their shift, will finish 1/2 hour early and just walk off the job.
That's correct.
That's pretty rough, isn't it?
We think it's rough that our members have to take this kind of action to get wages that are being paid to other workers in transit without having to take this kind of action. And we think that's pretty rough.
A lot of people, especially on low incomes, are really mad about the extra $5.60 a month that's been tacked onto the light bills to pay for transit. Don't you think you're being a little bit too tough?
No.
Have they given you any offers?
No, they've given us an offer of 0 and 2, which doesn't bring our people up to parity. And we agree. We don't think that the transit levy is fair. We don't think it's fair for unemployed people. We don't think it's fair for seniors and people on fixed income. But that levy is being used to pay for capital costs, for fancy equipment. It's not being used to pay our wages.
Now, just a minute, 0 and 2 on what? You must have a schedule at the moment which
Yes.
is equivalent to the BC Hydro schedule.
No, we've got a wage schedule at the moment which is substantially less than transit workers are getting in BC.
Like 5%, 10%, 2%?
A lot. It depends on the job classification. The percentage varies.
Now, do you have certification for the guys who operate the computers which keep the system running?
Yes, we do. We won that on Friday last week. And so we have the 20 control operators who operate the computer system that runs the whole SkyTrain system. They became members of our union Friday afternoon.
So just to sum up now, you're in negotiations, you're meeting with the company again this afternoon, but regardless of the meeting or the outcome of them, unless there's a settlement, you are going to start job action right now, no more overtime, and guys, once the train is in a safe position, will park the train and walk away.
That's correct.
At the station, I hope.
Oh, yes. That's not going to occur. The major effect that we expect is more in the maintenance, because the maintenance technicians have been working the most overtime. So where we expect the disruption is that there will be fewer trains available to come on the system, fewer that are in a safe
You realise, of
position.
course, that Mr. Bennett's line and Mr. Curtis's line, that those people with jobs, especially in Crown corporations, should not be greedy and go for more, and the teachers have been told they're going to get nothing.
If Mr. Bennett really believed that, then there are 20 to 50 jobs that he should be creating at SkyTrain, because it would be cheaper for him to have more employees there than to pay our members the overtime he's paying them.
Well, I hope you come to a settlement. You're meeting today.
Yes.
My thanks to Anne Harvey of O.T.E.U. Local 378. So stand by for delays in your SkyTrain service as of tonight and certainly tomorrow.
Yes.
As the maintenance mechanics don't work overtime, 20 to 50 people short in actual staffing, you say.
That's right.
And the public be damned?
No, we really are concerned about that. Our members really like
going to be the
SkyTrain,
most
and we know the public do.
It's going to be the most unpopular strike in history.
No, I think that people recognize that Mr. Bennett is not being fair here.
Would you not guarantee now, for the sake of all our peace of mind, that you won't strike during Expo?
No, we can't make that guarantee. We need a first collective agreement, and I can guarantee that we'll take any positive action that we can. We will bend over backwards to get a collective agreement here without disrupting the service.
My thanks to Anne Harvey. Best of luck to all of us. And I'll be back with Pat Clarke of the Teachers Federation after the break. Where's my pocket?
Yeah, that's great.
That was a wee bit shaky.
Just tape that under for you so it doesn't look too silly.
Oh, distractions, distractions. Honestly, I could hardly believe it, Pat Clarke, when I looked at poverty in BC with its illustrations saying increasing numbers of British Columbians are turning to trash bins in order to make it through the month. And that heartbreaking letter at the front about the 14-year-old girl on living with her mother on Gain, who is suffering humiliations because all her friends are rich and she's poor and they say she can't go to university. Is this really a propaganda handbook to push the cause of the social injustice in British Columbia as the Teachers Federation sees it?
No, what it is, Jack, and I think what the minister in particular in talking about it has not made clear at all, is what it is some background information for teachers that are teaching particularly in the social studies area. This is not intended for students. It's basically a package of information and primarily background of information that doesn't exist elsewhere in the system, and that's all it's intended for. It's quite different from those books, which are intended for children to be using in the schools.
Yeah, these are the government ones that cost $300,000, and they're all very positive. They're about computer technology, the film capital of Canada, the great new high-tech, deep tech, and this is kind of happy, upbeat stuff, thinking
Exactly.
the kids, pointing the kids to careers in the future.
That's right. We don't have any objection with that material in as much as what you have there. What we do have some problem with is, as teachers, we think there's some responsibility to present the whole social picture. And that material, and the other material that exists in the school system, doesn't do that. Now, we haven't gone so far as to say students should use that. They shouldn't.
You don't mind students using this?
No, we don't have any objection to it. We think there's other information they should have, though.
Yeah, and the other information you want to give to your teachers to tell them, the children, the realities of life in British Columbia.
To give them a little more critical picture. And I don't have any problem with doing that. I think that teachers have an obligation, if you look at it from this perspective, of trying to imbue children with some sense of a critical conscience about their society.
So this is for the use of teachers and suggested projects for the children from this book.
That's right. That's
And
right.
of course, COPE wants you to use this in the schools, doesn't it?
Well, I think all they've done is say that it's material that they would find suitable for teachers to use as
But
as
COPE,
background.
being deadly enemies of the government, the local school board, want to get the message across about how dreadful things are in BC at the moment.
Well, no,
And so do you.
Well, I think that you can take that kind of a line on it, but the line which the minister is taking I find just as upsetting, which is that this kind of material is totally unsuitable, and what we have to do is keep this kind of gloss on everything, because I find something quite disturbing about that. I'm hearing the sort of the pitter-patter of little jackboots and that kind of an attitude, that we don't want anything that reflects at all critically on the social dynamics in British Columbia.
Well, I noticed, for instance, some of the suggested projects you want these teachers to do in the classroom, don't you?
Well, they're only suggested.
Work out a budget, how you can live on the minimum wage, $3.65 an hour. Fast for 1 or 2 days on water only.
Well, you know, the minister used that one also, and so the advice in there is quite precise, is that teachers shouldn't do that kind of thing unless their parents are fully aware of what's going on and that doctors have been involved if need be.
Yeah, how much does dinner for two cost at a very expensive restaurant?
I wouldn't know, I never go to them.
All right, who is the highest paid salary income of the chairman and largest shareholder of one of the big companies in Canada? You know it, give me the answer.
Do I know?
I'm testing you.
I don't know.
1.22 million for the Seagram Company chairman E.M. Bronfman in 1984. Is this not really a little bit of class warfare?
I don't think so. I think all it is offering a perspective on the full range of the kinds of classes that there are in Canadian society. I think kids should know about that.
How much does the president of Brick, whose stock is down to $1.65, make?
Oh, I'll guess. What about 150?
$250,000. That's, what's his name again? Bruce Howe. You should have had that in, you see. But it is. You want the kids to live on gain.
Well, no, all that project calls for is to devise a budget on what you could do with that. I've done that kind of thing just as a social studies teacher myself. Look, I've used all kinds of background material. I've used Mein Kampf, for heaven's sake. I've used all kinds of polemics that are intended to give kids a background of all of the realities that exist. That's all.
I agree with you entirely. People should know the facts of life, especially in British Columbia, but it comes at a time when an election is expected, and you must concede, surely, Pat Clarke, it looks like political propaganda for the cause of the NDP.
And that's one of the unfortunate aspects of life in British Columbia, that you can't do this kind of thing without accused of being political. And that's what I made my remark about little jackboots. That kind of thing really worries me. It's a mentality that I think is ultimately more destructive than us certainly attempting to do that.
And you make no apologies for poverty in BC?
Not at all.
Let's get down to your other problems. How are things now? I had Mr. Hewitt on the other day, and I understand that he has no problems to get $300,000 for this, but problems to get a couple of million for textbooks.
Well, we're having textbook problems in the school system that are unparalleled. I've given some examples before publicly, but the best examples that we're using materials which were put out in the late 1960s, early 1960s. They're frankly totally out of date. We're being told now there aren't funds for those kinds of materials, and yet we have $110 million for school improvement, special projects.
No, excellence in education.
Yes, excellence in education.
But some of that has already been lifted for not for operating expenses, for
well, to pay teachers' salary increments, which are in contract. That is one of the features the minister has said that it could be used for. He's mentioned to some school boards that there could perhaps be some money for basic maintenance out of that fund for excellence. From our perspective, what the fund for excellence has simply become is a skimming away of a bunch of money that the government probably intended to give to school board budgets in the first place, but is now just keeping aside as a pork barrel.
It's a kind of a special fund. You would call it a pork barrel.
Clearly a pork barrel.
As the funds for health funding and for education funding.
Yes.
But Mr. Hewitt was telling me the other day, really, that he's been quite generous, and they produced all kinds of graphs to prove that they're spending as much as they dare on education, and I think you would agree with that.
I have some graphs here. Do you want to see them?
Just one. Equal time for graphs.
We want all sides of the story here. So we prepared diligently. Our graphics department went hard at work. This is one of the ones which we find particularly interesting, and this is the graph which we call the myth of restraint. A very easy one to explain. You'll notice that what the government has been saying has been trying to control the cost of government. They've been saying that repeatedly. We have here each year the amount of growth in the provincial budget, starting with 11% in 1983, going to 5.7% this year. That's how much more they've spent each year over the previous year. Look what they've done to education, 1% over the previous year in 1984, 83. 1.8% the following year. Last year, down 2.3%. This year, we don't know because there's so much shilly-shallying and fiddling around going on.
The secret of making a good graph, of course, is to keep the baseline short and put the tall line in red. Up 11, but you can make it any size you like. Up 11% and then down 2.3%. These graphs don't mean a damn thing, do they?
We thought it was important to show our graphs along with the minister's graphs so that there would be the other side of the story presented. That's another side of the story.
Well, are you hopeful for your upcoming negotiations? How many school budgets have been over the odds now? 68 have now submitted budgets above what is provided by the ministry. What the hell does that mean? It means no wage increases for you.
I think what it also means is that that property tax payers are looking at an increase in property taxes unless the government finds some more money from general revenue to put into the school system. It means that teachers, unlike any other employee group, are going to make their salaries very much a matter of public debate and scrutiny in a way that other employees don't have to go through at all. It has all of the elements of a confrontation in it, which would really be quite unfortunate.
Let's go to the phones on the little propaganda battle and on the image of teachers and on your upcoming negotiations and on whether or not people want to pick up the slack with about $90 or $100 per household on increased property taxes. After the break.
That everything is doom and gloom and disaster. Great way to instruct our children coming out of school. It has a project in there, Jack, which I don't think any teacher would advocate. Project number 6, fast, drink water only for 2 or 3 days. There are people doing that involuntary in BC every month. Keep a journal of this experience. In our schools, we would instruct somebody's child to fast for 2 or 3 days without medical advice.
No, we would not. Hewitt said your propaganda booklet was disgusting and that not one teacher would use it. How many teachers do you think will use it?
I think there would be quite a number of social studies teachers in particular that will use it. It's the kind of background material teachers are always anxious to get, that's all. And that's part of our job, for heaven's sake.
It's just the timing that's kind of unfortunate. That's what I feel.
Well, I think there's no good time here.
It leaves you open to attack. Go ahead to Pat Clarke of the Teachers Federation.
Yes, I'm a teacher on sick leave in Delta, and this booklet that the BCTF has put out is quite amazing, expresses the type of hypocrisy seen in the BCTF, and Mr. Clarke in particular. We're talking about teaching about poverty. I'm a teacher who's living under the the national poverty level. I was going to sell indemnity for 2 years. My health benefits are being cut. I've lost my car, my house. And the BCTF I've written letters to for help, and they've said, we have no sympathy for you whatsoever.
I think the best I can do is just take your phone number off
I don't want you to take my phone number. I just want it made public that you've got a hypocrite senior for that. I've spoken to this man myself.
Do you know this? Do you know the problem involving this man, Mr.
Yes,
Clarke?
I do. I do.
And he has done nothing to help me. The BCTF has lent me some money. Last week I got a letter stating they're going to cancel my health benefits, and these people tell me that they have no sympathy for me whatsoever, the people at the BCTF.
I don't want to wash all your dirty linen in public. If it is dirty linen, it's the kind of thing I feel vaguely embarrassed about. What do you say?
Well, Jack, we have a salary indemnity plan for members, which, like any member's salary indemnity plan with any other employee group, accords certain benefits to people that are eligible for it. The benefits eventually run out.
Now, wait a minute.
If the person is eligible for a long-term disability benefit, there's an independent assessment of that done by medical practitioners, and we make the determination on that basis. It works the same virtually everywhere.
Okay, we're talking poverty, Mr. Clarke. How about the fact that salary indemnity isn't paid to teachers for 2 months in the summer months? So if you've been off sick for 2 years and you've used all your savings and you have 2 months during the summer where you have received no salary, how about that for...
I don't mind embarrassing Mr. Clarke at all, but I think you've embarrassed him enough for the moment. But your private fight you're going to have with him. So don't blame me if I cut you off just now. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. What bothers me with the teachers is if they don't think they're getting enough money, why don't they do something else and go into some other field? Why should the taxpayers support them?
You know, we're not complaining about not getting enough money. What the basic issue is in British Columbia in particular, is whether you treat a group of employees fairly or unfairly. And what we've been maintaining for a long time is that in British Columbia, teachers have significantly different relationships with our employers which are not fair, and they're not holding up. And
teachers are almost like civil servants. They're being paid by taxpayers. And I think the election is the time to get your money.
Listen, what I'm telling you is that teachers do not have the same...
I happen to be a teacher.
Well, I don't think that you don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, I know what I'm talking about, and I've been satisfied with my money and what I've been getting. And if I don't make enough money, if I don't like the way the teachers are being treated, I just go into another field. And I think the doctors should be under the same suspicion if they're being paid by the taxpayers. If they're not paying enough money.
Well, there's a guy that doesn't agree with you. More or less. Go ahead, please.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say that the booklet appears to be a most irresponsible publication by a professional organization such as the Teachers Federation. But my second question, and my question is that to Mr. Clarke, what specifically is the Teachers Federation asking for in terms of a wage increase, in terms of dollar amount?
We haven't set any specific dollar amount this year. What we are asking for is are considerations that are roughly equivalent to what other employee groups are getting. We haven't set a specific figure.
You're going for the going rate, but you'll probably finish up in arbitration in most school districts.
Well, we hope not. The arbitration system's become a complete farce. We hope we can get settlements with school districts.
But on CSP now, does that affect you?
Oh, very much. That's why the arbitration system is a farce right now, because it means nothing in terms of what the eventual settlement is.
Because the BCGEU, it's 0, 1, and 2 over a 3-year period.
Well, that's the rule that's been set for the GEU. It hasn't been set for teachers, although the money that's in school board budgets indicates 0.
No money in the budgets for wage increases. They've been saying that since Heinrich, haven't they?
Well, since before Heinrich.
Go ahead from Victoria.
Yes. Good morning. I find it so hard to understand why we have a shortage of money for school books, etc., when so much money is spent in the schools on frills like stage equipment, lighting, microphones, the best amplifiers, etc., etc. You go to school productions and you see all this money.
Okay, I've had this call since the days of Tilly Ralston. The school system is full of unnecessary frills.
If there were frills in the school system 4 years ago, they're virtually all gone now. And that is a story we keep being told by teachers all around the province, that the frills started to be, if there were any, were removed from the system 2 or 3 years ago. We're talking basically about things like textbooks now.
Go ahead from Castlegar.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Webster, Mr. Clarke. I would like to say that I visited a school 2 weeks ago and was shocked to see the kids using their books as footballs. They were kicked up and down the hall. Children were trying to collect these books.
Ma'am, they don't do it all day, even in Castlegar, surely.
I I'm just saying.
I refuse to believe that all the school books in all the schools are used as footballs.
Well, they were doing a pretty
believe
good
it.
job, and I saw it with my own eyes. And Mr. Clarke, I agree with teaching the kids the financial facts of life. I think that's terrific. But I also think that all of us, including public employees and whatever, have to learn financial facts of life. I disagree as a taxpayer at this point with higher wages for teachers, and I also disagree with higher taxes for books. And I think that we have to teach the facts of life, and if they're going to ruin them, they can pay for them.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with the last caller there. I'm just a student who recently graduated school. I had an A average at school. I found that a lot of the teachers were very frustrated. I felt that that made a lot of students very frustrated. The dropout rate's getting higher. I don't think a lot of the teachers are really doing their job. I've attended school basically across Canada, and I find that BC is the worst place to attend school.
Boy, you're having trouble this morning. It seems to everyone get up on the wrong side of the bed. I thought that you had overcome the tide of public antipathy and were riding a tide of public sympathy.
I think that what we're seeing is some of the frustrations that are the product of 3 years of cutbacks in the system, and I think the venom is being directed in all directions.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, that book is a poverty syndrome, if I ever heard of it. I'd like to point out about a youngster in our neighborhood. She wanted to go on to higher education, so she went and worked in a bottle washing place. She babysat and everything else. Now she's going on her own money, having bought a car, and going to BCIT. And she's as proud as punch. Why can't the teachers teach that sort of thing?
That is an element of the reality of Canadian life, which is well documented in the materials that are available to students in school. It's the kind of presentation of the possibilities in Canadian society that's there all the time. That's the reason why we produce the other material, because the other side of that story, the difficulties of getting along in the society, is not presented. That's why it's there.
How many unemployed young people have we got in British Columbia at the moment, said he, under 25?
It's about 25%.
Yeah. It's a hell of a lot of people. It's about 60,000. More with Pat Clarke after the break. Just Pat Clarke of the Teachers Federation and myself talking about some of his problems, and this morning he's getting absolutely neither sympathy nor encouragement nor support. Let's try again, Pat. These calls... Go ahead to Pat Clarke.
Yes, good morning. First of all, when I listen to Anne Harvey and now to Mr. Pat Clarke, I find that all of BC taxpayers are being blackmailed by the government employees of all stripes because they think we can just keep on handing money out to these people. I'm just getting fed up with it. And as far as the Teachers Federation, I think this is the sleaziest publication I've ever heard of, and I think the BC Teachers Federation is the sleaziest federation in Canada. I haven't heard of anything like this happening before. And I think this man should be thoroughly condemned for it.
One of the things that I hope the public in British Columbia gets a little more clearly than some of the callers this morning seem to have is the fact that Anne Harvey made it quite clear. I'm making it quite clear. We're not asking necessarily for more money. We're asking to be treated fairly. And what is the scenario in British Columbia is that public employees have not been treated fairly for the last several years. And people can condemn us all they want. They can say that we're sleazy. They can try all of that kind of confrontational tactic. All that it's going to end in this province is chaos. And that kind of caller is a good example of that kind of an attitude. That's the main problem we got here.
Go ahead from the Moose Bay.
Yes, Mr. Webster. I just have this to say to Mr. Clarke. In our school district here, we've submitted a budget in excess of some $12 million. Now, the point I wish to make is that of that total operating budget, 89.41% of the total budget goes on teachers' salaries and benefits for teachers, support staff, and administrators. The kids are left with basically 10%. So all these horror stories we hear from the Teachers Federation about how deprived the teachers, how deprived the students are, it's because they have to deal with 10% only. Now, every time there's an increase in the budget, 90 cents of every dollar goes on salaries. Now, I'll just hang up, but I'd like to hear what Mr. Clarke has to say about the 10% the kids get. Thank you.
Listen, teachers in British Columbia are paid now about the least of any teachers in Canada. The education system, like any other sector of the economy, is competitive. And once again, I'll give you a fact of life, that if those salaries for teachers are not competitive with teachers in the rest of the country, you're going to have trouble attracting and keeping people in this province teaching. That's the reality. And the fact is that education is a labor-intensive effort. And it's going to cost the most money in that system to pay the people that work in it, unless you're going to replace us with television sets and robots.
That's right. The 90% in salaries isn't really quite relevant. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
That's you.
Mr. Clarke, you're going to get some support finally. I have up on my shelf here an old school atlas from about, 18 years ago when I was in school, and I was shocked when I went over to a friend's house and saw his kid there had the same atlas that I was using, and in that atlas are countries that don't even exist anymore, and that's just one example. I think it's ridiculous that I have friends that are leaving the province simply because they don't like the education that their kids are receiving, and that's all I have to say. I think it stinks here in the education department.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I wanted to call just to say that I think that the teachers in our area, which is North Burnaby, are the ones that I've had to deal with because of my son's education, seem to be getting more and more paranoid about what they're doing. And I think this has a direct reflection upon the kind of advertising, the kind of stuff that's being thrown at them, and it's been thrown at them for a long time now. And they're getting more and more paranoid. It's hard for me to even go up and talk to the teacher.
Yeah, what he's saying.
They immediately feel that I'm attacking them. I'm not. All I want to do is try and find out how I can work with the teacher to help my son.
Are the teachers developing a kind of inferiority complex due to the onslaught on them financially and politically?
Well, I think we've certainly identified that amongst our member teachers. And one of the things that I think is the most obvious has happened, I think, beginning with the Vanderzam years, even to a degree with Dr. McGeer, that there's been a steady attack on what teachers do in British Columbia and what we're asking for, and a depiction of us on a consistent basis as some kind of an unreasonable group.
Totally unfairly.
And we think that it's being done unfairly, and it's starting to be detrimental to the system, because I think the caller's quite right. Teachers are developing some attitudes towards their teaching which are not ones that allow them to do a good professional job simply because of the fears they're holding.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, my question is for you, Jack. Do you not agree that a complete education is necessary for our kids?
Yes.
Okay, well, is not teaching about poverty in British Columbia part of a complete education? If it was up to me, I think I would actually take children around areas where there is a lot of poverty and show them. The pitfalls
the only
in BC, maybe through alcohol or whatever, but just show them as part of their education.
I think this is perhaps a little bit over-dramatized, but the only point I make is that this pamphlet comes at a somewhat inopportune time politically, enabling those on the other side to say that it is totally a propaganda document. There's material in here which I'd rather not see in it, but by and large, teachers should be taught the social conditions in the province when they're being brought up. They should be taught about the dirty 30s. They should be taught about Hitler's war. And they should be talking about any other social developments. Maybe a little bit of American foreign policy today, too. I don't disagree with that at all. I'm merely taking the provocative position that this can be described by the opponents as propaganda. I think that's fair. Thank you. Logan Lake, BC.
Yes, I'm in support of the teachers, and I think that there should be more of this type of programs taught to our students. This week in Logan Lake is Educational Week, and I had the opportunity to go down to the classrooms and observe the teachers, and some of them classes are pretty fair-sized, some up to 40, and they don't only have just the one class, they have all classes all day, and then they have to check their homework. I support the teachers all the way down the line.
Thank you, sir. Penticton.
Morning, Jack. I was just wondering if I could ask Mr. Clarke. Teachers say that money isn't an issue. In the Vancouver Sun last week, there was an article about a teacher in Vancouver who says he makes $39,000 a year, and his wife is an elementary school teacher. She doesn't say how much she makes. We in the Okanagan would like to tough it out on that kind of money. There's so many unemployed here, I just can't see them. They say, well, we don't care about the money, but we're hard done by because this is all we make.
Yeah, I saw that story in the paper.
Yes, and I think
I thought, you know, boy, how sad.
the point the teacher was making, and it's a valid point, was that, and I think he made the point also that the money wasn't once again the issue. The money was the way in which teachers are dealt with as an employee group, you know, and I'll repeat it again. It doesn't matter how much you make if your employer consistently refuses to deal with you honestly, straightforwardly, and fairly.
Last call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a comment and a question. First of all, it's about time that the principals, the administrators, remedial readers, librarians, etc. were put back into the classroom and that salaries were renegotiated according to a teacher's worth, not according to the number of anachronistic degrees that these teachers have. Going back years and years ago, I have seen well-known people putting articles in the paper about who's going to build the cat. These aren't new issues, but they're issues that have to be dealt with before real revolutions happen, because the whole educational system is truly, truly degenerating. And I have a question to Mr. Clarke, and that is, what is the BCTF doing about the teachers' co-op that has gone into receivership?
The Teachers Co-op is a separate issue altogether. As I recall, it was an investment fund which didn't do too well and is under receivership at the moment, and you've got no plans to rescue it, have you?
Well, we were in fact advised by the receiver and asked by the co-op not to involve ourselves, and with respect to the co-op and its chances of a restructuring have followed that advice. I'd perish to think the calls we'd be getting this morning if we hadn't followed that advice.
Right now, well, on the broad picture, you seem to have gone through a tussle where I thought the public was coming back to you in a sympathetic manner, but not this morning.
No, some difficult questions and calls, but oh well.
What's your next crisis?
Well, I think the negotiations this spring are going to be quite critical, and the government coming around to establishing a mechanism for teachers that deals with us more fairly than it does right now, without introducing all these changes in rules that we've had to go through for the last 3 years. That's what's critical right now.
And right at the moment, after the budget cuts and the restraint and the fact that the school boards are going to have to go, if the government supplies the legislation, to additional property taxes to bring their school board budgets up to standard.
I think that's the element of the next crisis also, is what happens to property taxes because of the government's underfunding from general budget.
In fact, they're turning back the clock to 25, 30 years ago when places like Vancouver, with the property tax base, had more lavish educational systems than the interior. Is this discrimination going to reappear again?
Yes, I think that's the real danger in the kind of system that we have right now, is that school districts that have good residential tax bases are going to be able to afford better education systems.
This will be supplied to every teacher or just every social studies teacher?
No, any teacher that wants it.
Any teachers who want it.
Yes.
Not for use in the classroom, but for research material and possible projects if they want to use them.
That's right.
My thanks to Pat Clarke, President of the BC Teachers Federation. Have a good summer of negotiations.
Thanks very much.
Next, we're going to talk about the happy topic of mortgages with Mr. Alton of the Bank of Montreal after the break.
In arithmetic.
If I was going to buy a house today or want a mortgage for something or other, I'd be so confused about the various options I wouldn't know if I was coming or going. So I've got Thomas R. Alton, the president of the Bank of Montreal Mortgage Corporation, from Toronto, where they have prosperity, going to tell us how things are in British Columbia. How much money do you loan out in mortgages in the Bank of Montreal at any given time?
Well, we make new loans of about $2 billion a year.
$2 billion a year. And if I want a mortgage right now, what rate would I pay? Just a straightforward, simple 5-year mortgage at a reasonable rate, what would I pay?
11.5%.
Is that a reasonable rate?
Well, when you consider the prime rate is 12%, I think that's pretty good.
All right, I'm going to ask you a few questions of my own, first of all.
Sure.
If I have a mortgage from you, and I sell my house, and the buyer assumes the mortgage, and that buyer fades into the woodwork and can't pay, even though I've sold my house, will you come back and sue me for the unpaid balance if the house doesn't meet the mortgage?
We have that right in the contract. The thing you should do is to be relieved of your covenant in that mortgage when you sell the house and get the new purchaser to assume the new mortgage and be qualified for it.
But
then you don't have that problem.
Let me do that again, because we got so many complaints about people who found they were nailed, having sold their house to somebody else as they thought. They were nailed by the banker or the mortgage company not being able to sell the house to meet the mortgage and then coming back to the original owner. How did that happen?
That's just been a feature of the marketplace for the last 60 years.
So therefore, if I'm going to sell my house and somebody else is going to assume the mortgage, I must get you or whoever.
Get us to approve the new purchaser, and then we relieve you of your covenant and you don't have any worries.
But is it just as easy to sell a house in those circumstances, or does the new buyer have to go through the whole rigmarole of a survey and an appraisal?
No survey costs, no legal fees, no appraisal. In fact, no cost. Just come in and we will take a statement on the new purchaser, we'll do a credit check and approve him, and relieve you.
If he qualifies for the mortgage, I can get right off the hook.
You get right off, and no cost.
Now, as we all know, the mortgage market was really very bad for a long while. How are you doing now on repossessions in British Columbia?
In British Columbia, repossessions are way down. Arrears are way down. The trend for the last 2 years has been on a downward slope. And I think that'll continue.
Now, what about the trend being a way down, but you're not going to tell me that the mortgages are on the way up and that you're giving out lots of mortgages in BC?
We're giving out lots of mortgages in BC. The housing markets in BC are pretty good. You take the resale housing market last year, the MLS sales, multiple listing sales, were up 35% over the previous year. Starts were up 11% last year, and this creates demand for mortgage money.
This is in British Columbia?
This is BC, right here, your province.
Wish you could see it.
Well, I think people sometimes don't look for the optimism and the good news in some of these stories.
But you take interior towns like Kamloops and half a dozen other towns I know where house prices collapsed and where you just couldn't sell a house. Alberni was another place which was terrible, wasn't it?
Yes.
But you wouldn't say that this kind of trend is continuing in the backwood, in the towns of British Columbia where the primary industries are closed down.
No, it tends to be more in the lower mainland and Victoria, in the bigger population centers.
Now, in Alberta, you had a great deal of trouble because of that facility whereby I could sell my house for $1 to anybody and walk away, correct?
That's right. We had a lot of problems with that. But that's behind us now. People are not walking away from their houses. Again, another good news story in Alberta. Sales, MLS sales were up 70% in '85 over '84. House prices are going up in Alberta.
Depends what happens to the oil price in the future, though, doesn't it?
That's true. But this time around, with the weakening of oil prices, we're not coming off a speculative boom like we did the last time oil prices came down. I don't think it's going to cause major problems in their housing market.
Now, your little booklet here gives all kinds of different mortgages, none of which I understand.
Yes.
Can I still come in and get a mortgage amortized over 25 years at a fixed rate?
At a fixed rate and a fixed term.
The longer the mortgage, the less the rate?
The longer the term of the mortgage, the more the rate.
The more the rate?
That's right. A 1-year mortgage costs 11%. We have a 7-year mortgage, costs 11 3/4%. Not a lot more. But you can fix your rate for a full 7 years, and we're the only bank in Canada that will give you a 7-year mortgage.
I see if I want a 25-year amortization, I'm going to pay 16%.
No, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Those, you can, here is a table for calculating your monthly payment. In other words, if I tell you the rate today is 11, you look at where 11% is, and it'll tell you what the monthly payment is.
Oh, I see. Now,
okay.
What about the different types of mortgages? In my day, it was a monthly payment. Now I see you have weekly payments and bi-weekly payments. What's the advantage of weekly payments or monthly payments?
Yes, and we even have every 2 weeks, if you like.
Which is bi-monthly?
Bi-monthly and semi-monthly and weekly and monthly. So we got 4 options.
Well, what's the advantage of that?
The big option with the monthly is that you can pay your mortgage off faster because you're paying more often. Instead of paying every month, you're paying every week. So your mortgage comes down faster. Number 2, it allows you to match your pay period with your mortgage payment.
Just a minute.
So,
why does my mortgage come off faster if I'm paying it every week instead of every month? I don't want to be stupid, but explain that to me.
yeah, well, it's the cost of money. It's compound interest. The magic of compound interest.
Oh, so therefore if I make a weekly payment, or to be ridiculous about it, a weekly payment, I'm paying off the interest sooner and the capital doesn't get bigger quicker.
That's right.
Do many people go for a pay period, like twice a month, the mortgage?
Not too many. If the most popular is a weekly, then the next most popular is every 2 weeks, and then the least popular is the semi-monthly.
No.
But you know, we introduced this product 10 months ago. We now have almost 30,000 customers in Canada that take the weekly pay.
Am I not correct in saying, Mr. Alton, that it was the credit unions who started this ahead of the big banks?
Absolutely. We followed their lead.
And the credit unions have done very well in the mortgage field, have they not?
They have done well.
Now, in Toronto, of course, you have a boom. 5.6% unemployed in the environs of Toronto. Must be quite a difference coming out here.
It's a different story. The problem in Toronto today is the shortage of housing. You go to buy a new house and get a builder to build a house for you, it will take almost a year before he can build it. Incredible.
I wish it would come back this way again. All right, if you have any questions about mortgage this morning, any kind of questions at all about mortgages, about mortgaging, give Mr. Alton a call right now. Bank of Montreal Mortgage Corporation after the break. .5% is a one-year rate at the moment.
No, that's the 5-year rate. 11% is the 1-year rate.
11% 1 year?
Yes.
Can I take a mortgage for 6 months if I think the rates are going to go down?
Absolutely. It's even cheaper.
But what rate would it be for 6 months?
10 3/4.
Now, have I got to pay all the costs of the preparation of that mortgage for a 6-month mortgage? The same amount as a 5-year mortgage?
That's right. When you first take it out, you have to pay it, but every 6 months you don't have to repay the costs.
Or if I convert from a 6-year to a 6-month to a 5-year?
It's $65.
$65 is the charge.
Yes.
Now, does one always have to pay a 3-month bonus penalty if one is paying off one's mortgage ahead of schedule?
Not with an open mortgage, the 6-month open mortgage, there's no penalty.
An open mortgage?
An open mortgage, there's no penalty.
And I can repay the capital in multiples of $100?
100, 1,000, 10,000, whatever.
At any time.
Yeah.
Let's go for information and questions. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. I have a particular situation with a house that we're interested in that has urea formaldehyde insulation. And I know it's very difficult. A lot of traditional mortgage companies don't deal with houses like that. I wonder if you can give me some insight into opportunities or methods to secure a mortgage. And secondly, when is it advisable and when would you suggest that an individual should be working with Central Mortgage and Housing for securing special mortgage rates? I'll hang up now and listen.
Okay, on urea formaldehyde, that creates a problem in some cases in marketability. However, notwithstanding that, banks and I think trust companies will make mortgages on homes with UFI. They usually do it on a CMHC insured basis. The Bank of Montreal will do it, and you can get a loan from us today. You don't have to deal directly with CMHC. You can go to any lender. However, CMHC do have an information number. If you want further information, I'd recommend you call them.
Well, that's good. So the value of your house may be reduced, but you can still mortgage it.
The value is not always reduced, not necessarily.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, gentlemen. I understand the paying of the present mortgage rate when you sign your mortgage. What I don't understand, according to Bank of Montreal's policy manual, is on a condo, you can put another 0.25% charge on that. And also, if I'm renting that condo, you can add on top of that another 0.25%. I think that's highly unfair. Maybe I'd like to see it illegal. I'll hang up and listen.
I think you've got some wrong information. Our interest rate is exactly the same for condominium as it is for single-family home, as it is for townhouses. We only have one rate, period.
That's it, and that's the rate for that mortgage.
That's it.
He must be
There's
missing.
no quarter or half a point extra. I think he's got wrong information.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Assuming a purchaser qualifies, what is the maximum percentage that the Bank of Montreal will finance on a new house?
On a loan-to-value ratio, it's 90%.
Has that changed in the last 5 years?
Yes and no. On CMHC loans, we have always gone to 90%. On MICC insured loans, we recently increased that from 85 to 90%.
Thank you.
MICC being the Mortgage Insurance Company of Canada.
That's right.
Is that part? That's not part of CMHC, is it?
No, it's Private Enterprises Answer.
to CMHC.
to the government program.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello. I'm pointing up. I'm one of those Ed Beckley graduates. You buy into real estate with no down payment. But from what I just heard, do I understand that you need at least 10% for a down payment with the Bank of Montreal?
That's right.
Would you need, with a CMHC, I don't know too much about them, would they be able to help me in you see, I'm a first-time home buyer.
No, you can't get 100% financing from CMHC either.
No, he's talking about the Ed Begley and these real estate courses on television and satellite which tell you can buy 4 properties and do this and that with nothing in your pocket and become a millionaire in 6 weeks. They're talking about some of the sharp practices in the United States, I think.
Right. It's not the case in
You
Canada.
cannot buy a house with no money down here unless you're terribly lucky and get a vastly underpriced buy. Is that right?
Something like that.
And you still got to put up some front money along the way, haven't you?
That's right.
Yeah, good scam on Ed Beckley's part. Thank you very much.
Good, much obliged. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Alton, the Swiss apparently seem to lend out money about 4% below Canadian banks. How is it they do that, and how is it that some mortgage companies, municipal finance bodies have tried to use Swiss money and then they've steered away from it?
Well, Swiss money is not available in Canada. You'd have to move to Switzerland if you wanted to get a Swiss mortgage.
No, but he's talking about the international lending rates of the Swiss banks, which always seem to be 2 or 3 points lower than North American rates.
That's right. But you have a currency risk there, and so what you're trading off for a lower rate is a currency risk. And in fact, your money could cost you just as much, maybe in some cases could cost you a lot more.
Just like all our American borrowing from the South for our municipalities.
It's become very expensive.
It was okay when our dollar was at $1.03, but now that we're at 71 cents, paying back these loans must be the heaviest burden in this country today.
Terrible burden.
Terrible burden. Go ahead from Nanaimo.
Hello, I was wondering if I could get some advice on foreclosure, like on a situation where we have done everything we can and gone to the banks and tried to satisfy everybody, but our paychecks no longer allow that. And this house has been on the market for the 4th time and there's been no bites. What do we do?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
How much is your mortgage?
Altogether, 41.
You owe $41,000. You're behind in your payments.
No, we are not behind. We have a first and a second.
But your first and the second mortgage, but you can't get a buyer and you can't afford to keep it up.
No. There's no money left over. We've gone to the banks. We tried to talk to them. We've gone to other banks that we're not involved with. The people holding the second mortgage are not cooperating at all.
What would you like to do?
I would like to be able to live on our paycheck and still pay a mortgage.
You mean walk away from this house and get somewhere cheaper to live?
No, I don't necessarily want that. I would just
But if you
cannot
can't...
afford to live in this house any longer, and we can't sell it. We can't pay for it much longer.
What I would recommend is you go to your first mortgage lender and sit down and put your cards on the table and see if you can't work something out with them.
But what could he work out?
Well, banks will take, on occasion, if you haven't got the money to afford to make your payments, we will take a lower payment and capitalize the interest, the shortfall.
Have you tried that?
We have gone to them, and they guaranteed us a new mortgage if we sold this house. A new manager comes walking in, and he took everything away, and now they won't deal with us at all.
Well, what Mr. Alton is saying to you is that you should find preferably your own first mortgage holder who might take a lower monthly payment from you and then capitalize the outstanding interest and put it on the top and give you a longer time to pay back your mortgage.
Okay,
but that's something to start, but that's a common dilemma in British Columbia. What the hell do you do when you can't pay your mortgage? And you can't walk away because you can be sued personally for the balance.
That's true.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a Bank of Montreal mortgage we've held for almost 5 years. The first 3 years were at 19%, and now we're lucky enough to be down to 11.5%. But I find every time I phone the Bank of Montreal, they've now decided to centralize their mortgages to 2 locations in BC, and I hear also now that they're planning to centralize again, and I just continually get the runaround. The bank is constantly charging me transfer fees to take money out of one account to another. Every letter I write, I get a response, but nothing is done. And I'm just wondering why the centralization, when the mortgages were held at the branch you took it out, it was so much easier to deal with the people. I'll hang up and listen.
Okay, you say your letters and phone calls haven't been answered. What I'd like you to do is, if you would please write me, Tom Alton, President of the Bank of Montreal Mortgage Corporation. You could send that through any branch, or you can mail it to me directly in Toronto at First Canadian Place in Toronto. I will be happy to look into it and get you answers to all of your questions. As to the second question, why are we centralizing? We're trying to improve the level of service to our customers. Obviously, we haven't done so with you, but the ultimate goal is to improve the level of service.
Yeah, that's good, though, because obviously you're going to computerize these records and have them in a minimum number of places.
That's right.
So that one day you'll have all the mortgages in one office in Toronto.
Well, from your point of view, you will be able to call the bank and get immediate access to your information over the phone.
Mr. Alton, you've been a help this morning. I'll read your booklet one of these days. I should have read it before you came, the Mortgage Control Handbook. Give my regards to your former chairman of your bank, who was a grubby, ink-stained wretch with me in Victoria in 1953, fellow by the name of Fred McNeil.
I'll be glad to carry your regards.
He went to the top, and I'm still sitting here making a living. My thanks to Mr. Alton.
Thank you very much.
I'll be back with a free-for-all after the break. I got to tell you something quite frankly and honestly. This has not been my best week one way and another. I've got this big fancy dinner at the Canadian Club tomorrow night, about which I am extraordinarily nervous. And this is my last week of live programming before you get the reruns in April. And I'll be back in the fall, of course, God and everything else willing. But in the meantime, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do on Friday. I'm going to do a Webster walkabout at Expo. And you're going to meet some very interesting people indeed. I think we've got a little sample extracted and on tap now. Roll it. I see a character over here.
I know you.
Just a minute, please.
I know you. You're Phil Donahue, aren't you? Huh?
What's your name?
My name is Slim.
I know you, too.
Oh, hello. You do?
You're the head of security at Expo.
Oh, now, don't tell everybody. They'll all know.
Slim, you're a strolling player, are you?
Oh, you betcha.
You look a wee bit like Jimmy Patterson, too, as a matter of fact.
Well, just
That's
a
beside the
little
point.
bit, you know.
Now, I've got to go meet somebody over here.
All right. Oh, you're going to see Linda Oglove?
Yes, I'm going to see Linda Oglove.
All right. She's the director of entertainment publicity.
Linda.
Hi, Jack.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
If you'll just go away now. No, I don't know. I don't really. I think I look better in a white safety helmet and that old rain jacket that I bought for Lyle Island than I do in any other outfit because it covers my belly. Makes me look slimmer, makes me look less like a Toby Jug. Now, we're going to go for a free-for-all this morning. The propaganda story wasn't too good this morning. Poor old Clarke of the Teachers Federation took an awful bashing. I couldn't get a promise of no strike on SkyTrain for Expo. BCGEU are in trouble. Well, you know, they've got the negotiations going on. Mortgages was fine, I suppose. And I'm going to take some calls. We have a free-for-all going. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning, sir.
I hope your dinner goes well tomorrow night. That's the first thing. The next thing, I just want to comment on Pat Clarke's obvious dilemma. I think the teachers can only take so much battering. I think their morale must be at a low, and psychologically they must be really beat up. I just think we can only make them scapegoats for so long. Obviously, they're going to be good and bad teachers, but on the whole, I think they should be applauded for what they've been doing under the stress of restraint, or pseudo-restraint,
sure.
or whatever Mr. Bennett prefers to call it.
The real dilemma in British Columbia, and unfortunately I'm part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Well, I don't know if you're part of the problem. I think we need someone like yourself. I think you do a good job of pointing out the problems on all sides of the issue. That's the problem in BC, though. Most people don't understand all sides of the issue. The polarization is at a point now where it's a real problem, and I think this summer is going to really be a telling point. It's going to really reveal the truth in this province.
I think this government can be given 10 black marks for its unfortunate attitude of confrontation on all occasions. Nothing is ever done in nice, straight-up consensus negotiations.
That's why you should have Art Lee on your program a bit more.
Had him on once. I'll have them on again, I suppose. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Jack?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, recently there have been a lot of commercials on TV in reference to partners in BC.
Partners in progress, partners in enterprise.
Right.
Partners
Well, it sounds very political to me. It's almost like, because, you know, there's a wave of a new election coming, and this commercial seems like the only thing that's left out at the end. If you just switch to take out the partners and put in, we'll do the same in the future, you've got a political commercial. And I think, you know, they either should change it, because I think we're paying for this commercial, and I don't think it's quite right.
These are commercials paid for by government funds. I think it would be almost impossible to tote up the millions that are spent in what is political propaganda by the social credit government. And nothing has been more blatant than the typed explanations, the readout explanations of the budget. I can remember well the day when the budget was handed down, the newspapers covered it like a blanket in print, radio and television would cover it too. But now what we get is we get a little bit of budget speech, and then we get paid commercials from the government, which I think is an extraordinarily unfair and unjust expense of the taxpayers' money for political propaganda.
So you agree?
I agree entirely. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jack. I'd just like to talk about the wages in BC. I figure we're all going to be in a lot of trouble this summer. Expo's going to be here. Look what happened in Alberta. Unions, non-unions, we're all going to suffer. I think, you know, there's got to be something we can do with this, you know, especially with Expo being here.
There are two sides to the coin. You must remember that Mr. Bennett has made it perfectly clear that those who have jobs should not expect wage increases. On the other hand, the realities of the situation have not yet got through the noggins of for instance, the Building Trades Council. And while I'm totally against the reduction of union conditions and wages, there comes a time when everything's so much out of balance that reality must be accepted, or non-union will wipe out the union construction industry in British Columbia. And those on the far right will benefit from it. Not everybody in British Columbia, not even in the government, is on the far right. We want to keep unions. We want to keep union wages and conditions. But the new reality when it comes to the construction trade is going to have to be faced by O.T.E.U and the boys, and some adjustment made, or everything will go, unfortunately, to some of these non-union firms, many of whom are not admirable concerns. After the break. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm reflecting back to when I went to school in regards to textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have to buy our own. I don't know, you probably remember too, going down to Miller & Co. First day of school and trading in our old books and paying 50 cents or whatever for another one.
Well, those days have gone.
Oh, I know, but I also had children in the school system in the early 1960s in the high school level, and we used to have to pay rent on these books. And if they were not turned back in reasonable wear and care condition at the end of the year, we had to pay so much damage on them.
Doesn't that still happen in some schools?
This I don't know because I don't have children in the school system
Yeah, I think
now.
it does. I think it does.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I just thought I'd...
Yeah, good point, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, howdy. I'm an East End resident here in Vancouver, and I noticed there was a situation in with the prostitution in the area. I had actually cleared up a few months ago, and I was wondering why all of a sudden it's back again. Was there any kind of changes in bylaw, do you know, Jack?
No, there's been absolutely no change. C-49 is still in effect. There was one test case which the prostitute didn't win. She only won part of it. Where are you? Are you down around Pender and Kiefer or whatnot?
No, I'm in the East End of Vancouver, down the Broadway by the Little Italy.
Well, that's not known as a heavy air for prostitution hanging out, is it?
Well, Jack, if you go down Broadway, every other corner is pretty well busy.
No change. Phone the morality squad. Tell them you got a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, might as well phone them. Go ahead, please.
Hi, as a former resident of Ocean Falls, I'd like to know what's happened up there. Like the government they've gone in and pulled the last few people that were out of there, and they had everything up for sale, and just what has all become of it.
Well, they did try to re-establish one of the pulp mills a couple of years back, and it didn't work at all. And Ray Williston, the former Minister of Lands and Forests, was working on a proposition, but apparently it's all collapsed.
Yeah.
I don't know offhand, my dear, but I'll put it on my list. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, I just would like to hear your comments in regards to government programs that assist low-income people with special mortgages, such as the program that was in the early 70s, the O.T.E.U program, and the new ones on cooperative housing. I've always wondered whether, when it comes time to sell the residence that these people have purchased with the assistance of government money, whether they're able to profit on these homes. And I'm wondering specifically in regards to the O.T.E.U program, because that program happened before we had the big upsurge in real estate prices, and there was almost 100% profit could be made on a lot of those homes. And I just wondered whether the...
No, you're right. Some people in the early days of the boom made money on O.T.E.U homes, but there was a payback feature within the O.T.E.U mortgage provision if you didn't live in the house, as I recall, for more than 5 years. As far as a co-op is concerned, there are great advantages to living in a co-op, but when you want to get out, all you get back is your share value investment. That's all you get back. O.T.E.U, of course, became a disaster later on, perhaps sometimes because of construction troubles, and when the house market collapsed, many people walked away from O.T.E.U disasters. So I don't think, except at the peak of the boom, did anyone take any money out of the pocket of the taxpayers. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello, is that Jack Webster?
Yes, yes.
I want to find out, could you look back at about 60 years ago, in Kamloops they had an elephant hunt?
You gotta be joking.
No, I'm not. This is the truth. It was headlines in the paper.
No, it was a camel hunt. It wasn't an elephant hunt.
Yeah.
It was camels from the caribou. There never were stray elephants in Kamloops.
Yes, there were 7 got loose from the circus.
Oh, well, that's different.
And they had a hunt there, and they tore up half the orchards and everything else.
Were you there at the time?
In
Were you there at the time?
What?
Were you there?
No, I'm too young. I'm only 70-something. I was in Alberta at the time.
Listen, if you see one, give me a shout. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
The question I have is this upcoming inquiry by the BC Police Commission into the incident at the city jail. Are the police officers that are involved, are they compelled to give evidence, or would they be allowed not to take the stand and give evidence?
No. The police officers involved, the 6 or 7 men on that shift that night, will be subpoenaed and will give evidence. It really is a second public hearing. There was one before which the press didn't cover. This is the second time around in public. And no doubt they will testify, and I'll be back after the break.
Expo
15 seconds. Tomorrow, my favorite coroner, Glenn MacDonald. How come I'm dead? I'm Mary Collins, Tory MP for Capilano. Whatever else comes my way between now and Webster, tomorrow at 9 a.m. precisely.
Expo 86, 38 days to go.
Another scripted piece?
Yeah.
Off the top of your head?
Oh, yeah, that's for tomorrow, isn't it? Oh, that's a good one. That's an easy one to do. I'll do that off the top of my head. Nay bother.
You never scare yourself with your lack of preparedness.
No, no, no. The more I prepare, the worse I am. You know, if I have a script, I'm dead. If I have a couple of notes, you know, if I write down, now is the time for all good men. This is my soother. 10 seconds. How Come I'm Dead with Glenn MacDonald, tomorrow at 9 a.m. precisely. Sounds a little gruesome, but tomorrow I'm going to tell you about the night that Errol Flynn died in Vancouver, through the corner of Glen MacDonald at 9 a.m. precisely.